My name is Jeff Kelsey, and I'm Vice President of Products and Services at Express Metrix. Thank you for attending our webinar today. Before I get started, there are a few housekeeping items. We are recording this session, and we will email you the link to the recording. During the webinar, if you have questions, the GoToMeeting window has a question dialog, and you can submit those questions during the webinar. And at the end of the session, I'll compile those questions and answer as many as time allows at the end. The presentation today will last no longer than 45 minutes. That is it for the housekeeping items. The goal of our webinar today is to demonstrate how you can transform your Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager inventory data into license intelligence using Express Software Manager. I'd like to start today by giving you some information about the company Express Metrix, including the product offerings. We'll discuss the strengths and challenges of SCCM, at least from what we hear from a customer perspective. I'll describe the features and functionality that comes with Express Software Manager for SCCM. I'll show you the product architecture, or discuss the product architecture, and then we'll do a product demonstration. And as I mentioned, at the end, I'll answer questions, and you can submit those again via the GoToMeeting window. Express Metrix has been in business for the past 14 years, exclusively focused on IT asset management. We're really known for rationalizing data, especially software data, and making sense of that data. During that 14-year time period, we've deployed our product to over 5,000 companies worldwide. We're located in Seattle, Washington. That's where our headquarters are. That's where all our product development is done, and that's where our primary technical support is done as well. One of the things that's important to us is differentiating ourselves by providing world-class customer support to our customers. And what that means is when you call us, most likely somebody's going to answer the phone. And when we ask our customers how they would rate us, they rate us very high on a scale of 1 to 10 as far as their satisfaction with our support organization. But it's more about just buying than buying a product. It's about doing business with us as a company, and we value our customers, and we think that's very important in the buying decision as well as just looking at products, but who you're actually going to be doing business with. Express Metrix offers 3 product editions for what we call Express Software Manager. There's Express Software Manager, the flagship product. There's Express Software Manager for SCCM, the primary product that we're discussing today. And then we also offer a product called Express Software Manager for Citrix, which is designed to run in Citrix farm environments. So let's talk briefly about Express Software Manager, the flagship product. It is designed to collect hardware and software inventory, software metering data. It has a purchase tracking reconciliation system, and it also has the ability to deny access to applications, meaning prevent somebody from running an application. That product uses our own client. Our own client is deployed out into your environment, and that client collects information from Windows and Mac environments, and it's licensed per seat or by machine. On the far right, Express Software Manager for Citrix is very similar to the flagship product, except it does not include hardware and software inventory. It's designed to collect usage data, associate that usage data to end node devices that are actually connecting to Citrix servers and Citrix farms, and then do license analysis and license compliance based on that type of usage. And we use our own client in that case, and it's licensed a little bit differently. It's licensed per user in that situation. Express Software Manager for SCCM is the primary product that we're talking about today. And the 2 fundamental differences here is that product collects hardware and software inventory, and it uses our purchase tracking reconciliation. There is no usage or control piece with that. And the reason for that is we're relying on data that's collected via SCCM, via the SCCM client. So we do not use our client. We basically connect to the SCCM database to pull data out, and we're using that primarily for Windows interfaces, and again, it's licensed per seat or per machine, and obviously we're going to go into more details about that product today. So historically, I mean, since we have been in business, SMS existed and now SCCM, and customers continually tell us similar stories about their implementation of SCCM. It's very good at deploying software. It's good at patch management. It does a good job with configuration management, and it also collects hardware and software inventory. The challenge typically that we hear from customers is it doesn't always do a good job of recognizing software properly. It doesn't recognize software from a license analysis perspective so that you can make sense of that data from a purchasing perspective. It doesn't have strong integration to purchasing or purchasing type infrastructure to enter your entitlements. You can certainly import Microsoft entitlements, but it gets increasingly more difficult to pull in other types of data. And then finally, reporting and data presentation is often a challenge when you're looking at it from an asset management perspective. The key here is that the SCCM is a great product. It just isn't focused as much on the software asset management side of things as that a licensed manager wants it to be. In addition, there's also sometimes some political issues internally with allowing a non-System Center person access to data from the System Center system. They might be able to do some reports or schedule reports, but it becomes a little bit of a conflict. And in fact, we often hear that the SCCM people sometimes don't like the fact that they're approached by other organizations because they want them to create reports and do all sorts of things from an asset management perspective, and they're busy doing other things like deployment and patch management. So that's just a summary of what the challenges that we typically hear, and as a result, what people want is a product that will leverage the data that you're already collecting with SCCM so you don't have to deploy another client, so that you can get IT asset reporting and license intelligence based on that data that's being collected with SCCM. And also, one of the things that we learned very early on is people want that represented outside of SCCM and not necessarily integrated into the SCCM console. And you'll see that's what we've done. So Express Software Manager for SCCM is going to give you visibility over your IT assets by allowing you to report on your software and hardware inventory, and really taking that software inventory data and running it through a process that rationalizes that data to make sense of that data for you. And that enables you to do software compliance and license analysis. And then we also have a very robust IT purchase tracking system that allows you to enter purchasing data into your system. All of that's there so you can answer critical business questions about compliance, about who's using or who has what software installed in your environment. You also can, ensure that data gets normalized, so all your Adobe manufacturers and your products are normalized. And then there's a variety of other things you can do with the data, and again, during the demo, you'll see some of those things. So what makes us different? So what makes us different from other products, and what makes us different from SCCM? For one, we are known in the industry for being one of the best at identifying software. As far as collecting data off of machines, processing that data, we use a database called the Express Software Identification Database. And that database has thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of titles in it. And basically, when we collect data out of SCCM, we're going to take the raw data and we're going to rationalize it against our knowledge base or our identification database. And so that database is updated on a monthly basis for all our customers. We're adding anywhere from 500 to 1,000 apps a month into that catalog, if you can believe it. It just always amazes me at how much new software, how many new versions are out there that have to be added. In addition, the product's easy to deploy and use. You're not going to need a team of people to deploy our product. In fact, the Express Software Manager for SCCM product you can probably have deployed in less than an hour. So have it deployed, have data, and be reporting on that data. We also, as I mentioned, have an IT purchase tracking system. The history behind this system goes back a long ways as well. For years, customers have said, we've got this entitlement data, and it's in another system. It's in an enterprise purchasing system, or it's in Excel spreadsheets. And a lot of times, the people that have it in enterprise purchasing systems would tell us the detail isn't in that system. And as a result, they created spreadsheets to get more detail. And then we have other customers tracking it manually, still in file cabinet drawers. And what people wanted was a system to track all this data within our product. And what that enables you to do is to easily reconcile what you've purchased with what we're discovering from an inventory perspective. and it allows you to associate that to your users in organizations. So again, you can enter this data manually, but you can import the data as well. All of the data that we collect, that we pull out of SCCM, or if you're using our client you collect, isn't going to be useful to you if you can't easily report on it. And again, if we go back to SCCM, the SCCM reporting facility, I would say, is not a poor facility. It's just not focused on asset management. And so what we're doing is really putting a focus on asset management and giving you a web-based interface that you can use that's outside of SCCM that has advanced filtering capabilities, which, again, you'll see during the demonstration. I mentioned we've been in this industry for a long time, over 14 years, and during that time period, we've won various awards from various organizations. We're involved with all the organizations that are associated with license compliance and software asset management and compliance and legality. We're also a certified partner with Microsoft. We have multiple partnerships with Microsoft. We're an ISV partner. We're an SCCM Alliance partner. We're also been involved with their SAM program. We're also a Citrix Ready product. And then down below, there's some technology licensed by. I mentioned before that we're known in the industry for software recognition. One of the reasons we're known is because we license that technology to some worldwide software companies, including IBM, BMC, ASG, and some others that aren't listed on this page. So those customers, our OEM partners, are taking our Express Software Identification Database and using it in their products to properly identify software as well. So again, we're known in the industry for that, and we obviously have to maintain that level of quality in order to support those large OEM customers. So let's dive a little bit more deeply into the product, and let's start with product architecture. And again, one of the things, we have 3 editions of the product. Those 3 editions really look the same in all the back-end components. So if you look in the blue box, there's an Express database. That Express database exists for all editions. In addition, one thing that's not up here is an IIS server. So most of our communication is done over HTTP or HTTPS. And if you look down at the bottom right, you'll see a purchasing console, which communicates through a web interface. You'll see Express reports that communicate through a web interface as well. In the upper left is Express Software Manager, our flagship product. I mentioned it uses our own client. It actually communicates over HTTP and HTTPS as well, and it collects inventory and software usage data. In the far right, Express Software Manager for Citrix, it also uses our client, and it also communicates over HTTP or HTTPS. The product that we're talking about today is in the center, Express Software Manager for SCCM. It's a little bit different. That product has a connector called the Express connector, or in this diagram we'll call it the SCCM connector because we're talking about SCCM, that connects to the SCCM database and pulls out raw data. And what I mean by raw data is we're pulling out file executables, file sizes, file paths. We're pulling out global unique identifiers. We're pulling that raw data out, and then we're processing it through the Express Software Identification Database, and then we're presenting it in our product. So regardless of which edition you have, the data is going to all look the same. You're going to use the same interfaces to actually view that data. One of the questions that often comes up is, why don't we collect usage data out of SCCM? The reason is the SCCM client doesn't really do a good job of taking an executable that's being launched and associating it to a known application. Our client has built-in technology that goes back and forth between our server to be able to properly identify that software. So that's one of the reasons. I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop or unshare my desktop temporarily to get ready for the demo. And what you're going to see us do here is start with a really simple utility. So I mentioned that in order to get data out of SCCM, we use a connector. And this connector is just a really simple utility. And I've actually got that connector open on my screen right now. And if you were evaluating our product or looking at our product for the first time, you would open this connector and this screen that I'm showing you would be displayed. And it would ask you to create a connection to the Express database. So the assumption here is you've installed our product, there's an Express database, and this connector needs to connect to our own database. And in our case, the database is called Demo, And I've actually already connected to it, but you can see that I had to enter some credentials, some SQL credentials to get to that database. Once that is done, then I create a connection to the SCCM database. SCCM 2007 or greater will support. And when I create that connection, I'm using Windows Authentication, and you can see I've got the SCCM database selected. That's actually the name of our SCCM database. It's called SCCM. So part of the process of creating that connection is the actual connection, but then you also have the option of choosing what collections in that SCCM database you want to actually pull data from. So you can pull all data from all your systems, or you can select a specific group of machines that you want to pull that data from. The next step is an optional step. By default, we are automatically going to pull all the software data that we need in order to provide the reports that you want. From a hardware perspective, we're going to map our default mappings to SCCM default mappings. In some cases, we have hardware values that SCCM may not collect by default, so they may be blank. Typically, I would say 99% of our customers never come in here and mess with this screen. But what it does, if I click on biostate, down below, what you'll notice is it's telling you the WMI property that gets this value and also the view out of SCCM that we're pulling that data. If I wanted to change that value, I could do a search for BIOS over on the right-hand side. And what I'm doing is searching all the values in SCCM. And I could say, oh, I want to change this to the release date. And I can see a sampling of what that data would look like. Most of the time, our mappings are accurate. And most of the time, customers do not manipulate the screen. But it's certainly here and available to do that. So once I create the connection, select my collections. And if I choose to do any mappings, I'm all done, and then I click OK. I've created my connection, and the next thing I do would import the data. Now, if you're evaluating the product, you're probably going to walk through this manually the first time. You have to set the connection up manually, obviously, the first time. But clicking on import, you might do manually as well. However, after that point in time, it's usually a scheduled task that you configure to run, and it will, on a regular basis, based on your schedule, import data from SCCM. The first time we import data from SCCM, we have to pull all the data. If you've got 10 to 20,000 computers, it might take 2 to 3 hours to pull that data in. A lot of that depends on the performance of SQL. Once we pull in that first import, from that point on, we're only going to pull in data that's changed. So it will be incremental changes that occur in the SCCM database that will be pulled in. So again, depending on your frequency of doing inventories in SCCM, that might drive how often you actually do the import into ours. So pretty simple process to set that up. So now you've got the data. The next thing you want to be able to do is to look at that data. And again, this is the Express Reports console. This is a completely separate interface from SCCM. And what I'm going to do is walk you through how this console works today and show you some sample data. There are a lot of reports in our product, all focused on asset management. I'm not going to get to all of them today, but hopefully give you an idea how the product works. This first page is a status page, and it's got charts. You can see I've got an office installation chart. I've got an MI compliant chart, an OS chart. You can have purchasing charts. You can have inventory charts on this dashboard. All of these charts, by the way, you can click, and they will drill you into more detail about that individual element. And I'll come back and you'll see how I do that later. The Reports tab lists all the reports that are available in the product. Not all reports are chart-based. Some are tabular-based. You can see I've got software inventory expanded. You can see there's a license management category. So you can come in here and run a specific report. Filtering is important, and before you actually run a report, you most likely want to select or create a filter. And today you will see as I do the demo, I will load filters, and I'll talk about that as I do it so you get an understanding how it works. On the left-hand side are filter properties. I'm only going to talk about a few of these, but essentially you can select these filter properties, and then you can save that filter, and you can apply that filter to any report that you run. And you can share those filters, or they can be private filters that only you can see. So for example, I've got manufacturers selected. I can click on Include, and I can choose Adobe. The other thing you'll notice is that the manufacturer name has been normalized. Adobe systems may be represented multiple ways in SCCM, but we're going to normalize that data. So you're only going to see it one way in our product. And that's part of the normalization that goes through our catalog, is to make sure that you're not getting things represented multiple ways. So if I only wanted to run a report on Adobe Systems Incorporated, I can include that manufacturer in my filter, and that's all I'm going to see. In addition, all the software that we pull in and identify, we're also going to categorize based on a United Nations product code standard. So if you wanted to run a report on all the computer games or entertainment software in your environment, you could do that, which is often a fun thing to do. You can also filter on an individual app. Again, these have been normalized, so we're not going to see things listed in a variety of different ways. But if I wanted to get very granular and only wanted to look at Adobe Acrobat Professional, I could do that. You can filter on license types, metering price. You can also filter based on your Active Directory structure. So we'll discover your Active Directory, and maybe you only want to run a report on support, or maybe Seattle or Texas, or whatever type of groups that you have in your Active Directory. And if your Active Directory doesn't represent the way you want to group things, you can create your own user-defined structure within our product as well. So you can see I've created a variety of custom groups here: Seattle, Seattle South, Texas, UK, Vermont. So I could filter based on those. I can get very granular and filter on an individual machine. I have a query builder, which I'll come back to later. We can filter based on terminal servers and Citrix. Again, that would be if you had our full product. And then path, duration, and dates. And as I mentioned, all these filters can be saved and loaded later. And again, when I start getting into showing you data, you'll see how I use the filters. Administration tab is only available if you're an administrator of the product, and it allows you to determine who actually has access to the reports console. So one of the things you didn't see me is log in. I logged in and actually had to enter credentials to get into the reports console. So let's jump back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a filter. And most of the time, customers are going to have filters like a Microsoft filter, an Adobe filter, location-type filters, or organization-type filters like IT accounting. A lot of that will depend on the company and what they want to run. In my case, my filters have to do with showing a demo to customers. So I have a compliance filter that I'm going to use. And I'm loading that compliance filter, and my compliance filter is limiting the applications that I'm looking at. And I'm doing that is because what I've done is selected applications that customers most often care about and want to see represented during the demo. So in my case, I've got 22 of these. 10 of them are reporting that they're out of compliance, and 12 are compliant. And if I look at the list down below, you can see the not compliant and the compliant. And let's pick one of these out. Let's pick out Office Enterprise 2007. You'll notice the third column over says 5. That represents what we're entitled to, meaning what we own. And then we're comparing it to what we found installed from the SCCM data, which tells us 8, which means we have a license deficit of 3. We're taking a unit cost, and we're calculating a license deficit cost. In addition, I can click on Office Enterprise 2007, and it will drill me into more detail about that application. You'll get the same type of information in the header. I should point out that the usage piece would be 0 in SCCM implementation. If you're using our full product, you'll get usage data back. And then down below, you'll see all the machines that actually have it installed, and we can tell because they've got a check mark next to the machine name. So again, you can get into a product by looking at data like that. So let me shift gears again, and I'm going to load another filter. And this time I'm loading a filter that is really focused on some limited looking at suites. So we looked at suites, that Office suite from a suite perspective, but what we know is customers often want to be able to look at the suite and the components associated to that suite. So we're not only going to tell you about the suite, but we can also tell you what components make up that suite and how many times each of those components are actually installed. So you'll notice the far right-hand column tells you how many times those components were installed. And this data can be useful in helping you make better decisions in the future about what suites you're going to actually deploy in your environment. In addition, I can group this by application, so I can see, well, here's Microsoft Access. How did it actually get installed? From what suite was it installed from? So again, it's another interesting view to look at to see, well, Access is most often being installed when it's part of Professional Plus 2000, or no, I'm sorry, Office Enterprise 2007 and 2003, but some of the other suites aren't usually installing that. One of the things that we talked about, or I talked about earlier, was the fact that the way data is represented sometimes in SCCM isn't necessarily easy to understand from a licensing perspective, and the data is not necessarily consolidated. In our product, we have something what we call a license unit. It's basically a container. That container might hold suites, but it also contains individual applications. And if you look at WinZip, you'll notice there's no version information. What we've done is we've taken all the WinZips in this environment and we've calculated a total installation count for all WinZips. And that's very useful in some cases. It's useful when applications aren't licensed independent of version. But if I want to know the version information, I can click on WinZip and it will drill me down, and now it's breaking it down by version, how many installations by each version, and what machine has what version installed. So you can come at it a number of different ways within our product. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to load another filter. And this is kind of my default filter that I typically use when I want to show a lot of things. And I'm going to jump back to the dashboard. And you'll notice in the upper right there's an operating system distribution chart. So we're seeing the operating systems. I can click on Windows 7 Enterprise, and this will drill me into a detailed report about all these operating systems in the environment. So although we have a focus on software, we also collect hardware details as well. So in this report, we've gone away from the software, and what we're really showing you is the machine name and a variety of hardware values out to the right. So we know they all have Windows 7 Enterprise. In addition, this is what we call an analysis grid. We can actually group data, so I can come in here and choose RAM, and what I'm doing is grouping all the data by the amount of RAM that's installed on the computers. So now you'll see RAM in the left-hand column. You'll also notice some of these are virtual machines. We do have the capability of identifying virtual from a physical machine. And anywhere you see a machine name within the product, you can click on that machine, and it will drill you into a detailed report about that specific machine. So now we're getting very granular. We're looking at an individual machine on our domain, and you're going to see all the hardware values that we collect by default. There's CPU, RAM, processors, memory slots, the Dell serial numbers in the upper right. It's the Dell Optiplex 360. So you're seeing that type of information. You're seeing disk drive, network adapter summary information. And then at the bottom, you also see all the software that's installed on this computer by version. One of the questions people sometimes have is, what are the values in red? If you're using our flagship product and we're collecting usage, we can call out things that haven't been used in this report. Customers also often want to report on changes that occur in the environment. So you roll out 600 computers to an organization, and everything looks great. And about 6 months later, you start getting lots of calls from that organization, and you're trying to figure out what has changed. So we can look at that from both a hardware and a software perspective. This is showing all the values that have changed between two time periods. So in the product, we let you set a baseline. A baseline is a point in time. Then you compare it to another point in time. So I'm actually comparing September 18th of 2012 to April of 2013. I can come down here, and I can see there's two computers where the RAM went from 2 gigabytes to 4 gigabytes of RAM. I can click on one of those machines, and it will drill me into a detailed report that shows me all the changes that have occurred on that machine. Now, in this case, this machine went from XP to Windows 7, so it's showing a lot of changes because some of the values changed in a lot of hardware areas. In addition, we can show you all the software that was installed and removed from that computer during this time period as well. So we can see that we went from Office 2003 to Office 2007. We went from XP to Windows 7. So you have that type of information. In addition, we can also look at changes from a software perspective. And in this case, I'm grouping it by manufacturer. You'll often see different ways to list and show data at the top of reports. And I can look and come down here and see, well, so Primo PDF, we went from 2 installs to 5 installs. What machines installed that software during that time period? These 3 machines did that. So again, it gives you visibility into changes that are occurring in your environment between two time periods. Earlier, I mentioned that we also have a query builder in the product and that I would come back to it. This query builder allows you to do things like, let's find all the computers that have Windows XP. So we have very few XP computers left in our environment. But let's go ahead and add this statement. And what I want to do is find the machines that have XP on them that have less than 2 gigabytes of RAM. So we're going to do that. We'll add that statement. Now, I could go on and add additional criteria if I want, but I'm going to just keep this pretty simple for this example, and I'm going to come in here and run what we call a custom hardware inventory report just to give you a view of a different report. And while we're waiting for that to come up, I'll mention that Query Builder is fairly easy to use for people that aren't technical, but for people that are technical, you have a lot of flexibility to do things in there. So what's come back, you'll notice in the far right-hand column, all these machines have less than 2 gigabytes of RAM. I chose to also collect Service Pack, and you can see they're all XP Professional installed. So these are machines that might go on a list that we might decide we're going to do something with these computers because they're probably, in our case, going to be recycled and not used anymore in the future. So again, and you can modify the fields that you actually display. There's a whole list. All these fields are fixed attributes and custom attributes that you can choose to display in this report. So I've touched on reporting. There are a lot of reports in the product that I haven't touched on today, but that hopefully gives you an example from a software and a hardware perspective of what we're capable of doing. Now what I want to do is show you the purchasing console. And I want to remind everybody that this purchasing console is here designed to allow you to manage your software and hardware assets in your environment. Some of you may have systems that you're already doing this in, but it may not have the details. We've learned over time that customers have often scrapped those systems to use ours. And then we also, there's 3 ways to get data in here. You can actually manually put data in here, but you can import it because we recognize that you've got data in other systems. And we also have an API that can also be called by other systems to pull data in or put data into our system. So in order to show you how this works, I'm going to walk through doing a manual entry into the system. And we're going to actually add a purchase. And you'll notice we have add a lease, but I chose purchase in this case. And let's imagine that we have an order, and we have an order number. And the system allows you to segment data. So you'll notice I have sales support in UK. Basically what this does is prevent somebody from sales from seeing support's purchasing data and vice versa. In this case, I'm going to enter it as a sales. Now I'm an administrator, so I can see them all. If I was just sales, I'd only be able to see sales. I'm going to add a description. Let's imagine we're ordering computer and software for sales. And PO, we might have a PO or invoice. I'm going to put in a total price of $3,000. It's from Dell. And I can put notes about this order. I can also associate documents or actually upload documents into our Express database. So your order document, your quote document, your proof of purchase document, your use rights document, whatever you want to associate to this order, you can do. In the upper right are custom fields. You can have numeric string, date, currency fields. You can also have list box. In fact, the second custom field is CC for cost center, and it's a required. I know that because it has an asterisk next to it. So I'm entering this data, and when I create an order in our system, there's multiple layers, and the order information is the high-level information. And now what I'm going to do is add the detail, or what we refer to as line items. And let's imagine that we're ordering an Optiplex 9010. It's from Dell, and it's a computer that the SCCM client or our client is going to manage. However, you can track any asset in our system. You can track a desk, a telephone, anything that our client can't be installed on, you can choose other asset and track it. If it is a computer that the client's going to be on, you want to choose computer because there's some automation that occurs by doing that. We're going to choose a quantity of 1, and we're going to say it's $2,500, and we'll have a status of ordered. You can have whatever status you want. This is all customizable. Notes, custom fields, and I could save this, but this system comes with a service contract. So what I'm going to do is put the start date of the service contract, and I'm going to put the end date of the service contract, And typically, I would also put service description or the contract information, contract number in here as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now, once I save this, I want to point out several things. One, I typed in Dell. You'll notice it says Dell Computer Corporation everywhere. And the goal there is we have a normalization methodology that you can invoke to make sure that that happens. In addition, you'll notice I have two line items, one for the computer and one for the hardware maintenance. There's also a renew button for your renew process when you actually renew that service agreement. And then finally, over on the right is an assign button. And what I want to do is I want to assign these assets. Now, this is optional. You don't have to do it. We find a lot of customers do. Let's imagine that I want to assign this to me. So I looked for my user account in Active Directory. I could have searched by my last. I happen to know my user account, so I searched by that. Maybe more realistically, I searched by last name, and there I am again. I'm going to select that, and let's imagine I'm part of the sales organization. And then I can save this, but before I do, I want to talk about the serial number field. Earlier I said if you're putting our client on it and you're creating an order, you want to choose computer. The reason for that is as we create this order, I don't know the serial number. It's part of my process is to put the data in here. I send it to Dell. Dell's going to ship me the computer, and when I receive the computer, I'm going to get a packing slip, or I'm going to look at the box, and it's going to have a serial number on it. And part of my process is to come back in, update the status. It's been received. It's sitting in the warehouse, and oh, this is the serial number. Once I have that serial number and I save that, when that machine gets deployed in a couple of weeks with the client on it, it's going to collect the serial number too. And what will happen is we'll come back and we'll look in the purchasing database for matching serial number, and it will automatically reconcile those two. So you don't have to map this purchase to a device out in your environment. If you've entered the serial number, it will automatically happen. So in my case, again, my process, I don't have a serial number yet, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. So we've assigned the computer. We added maintenance. We also talked about adding software. So to do software, I'm buying some Office. Let's just say I'm buying Office. I'll be real generic. And what I can do is go look for all the Office that's in my environment. And this is actually Office Professional Plus 2013, so I'm going to select it. It's a quantity of 1. We'll say it's $500. The status is it's been ordered. Notes, custom fields, again, I can add maintenance. I'm going to skip that just to save time. So I'm going to save that. And again, I can go in and assign the software as well. Once you create orders, typically in somebody's process is the fact that you have to manage this data on a day-to-day basis. A lot of you are using Excel, our combination of CRM systems and Excel, and what we're trying to do is to orient this or organize this data so you can easily find it. So if I go to all orders, here's the order I just entered at the very top of the screen. But I can look at things, I can look at my leases that are expiring, buyout notifications, I can look at it by purchases, and I also can change these columns, what columns are displayed here. And then if I move to line items, I'm going to get more granular. Remember, I entered multiple line items. If I want to look at just the hardware line items, I can look at all my hardware line items. I can look at hardware maintenance line items that are expiring. Again, I can change the columns. I can sort these. I also have the ability to search. It's not uncommon if you're buying software and hardware for somebody to walk up to your desk and to ask you to find something. Can you tell me all the orders that we have associated to VMware? So I type in VMware, do a search, here are all the orders associated to VMware. So I'm searching all text columns, but I could search individual columns, numeric columns, currency columns, so I have a lot of options there as well. If you choose to assign all your assets, then you're going to want to be able to report on those assets based on those assignments. The left-hand navigation represents a variety of different ways you can view that data. I'm just going to show you one today. Let's imagine that I wanted to find all the assets associated to a specific user. So I'm going to choose one of our account reps here, and here are all the assets associated to that account rep. Now, if I wanted to, I could reassign all those assets to a different user in one swoop. So I can select them all, reassign them. The Reconcile tab is going to show you computers that have been reconciled. What does that mean? In the far right is the domain and machine. In the middle is the serial number, and that serial number exists in this order. Unreconciled computers are going to exist because you haven't entered serial numbers because those computers haven't been received or they haven't been inventoried. In my case, I have a lot of them because I haven't entered serial numbers. They're fictitious computers. But in a real environment, this list will grow and shrink as you deploy your computers. Documents allows you to manage your documents. The preferences is where you can customize the product. It's also where you can set up reminders. You can set up email notifications to be emailed about leases that are expiring, lease buyout notifications, meaning sometimes you have to notify them that you're going to terminate a lease, maintenance agreements, and it allows you to send email, and it also allows you to determine what the message is going to look like. And when you receive that message, you'll receive it with a calendar file. The reason we did that is we know a lot of people work within their email system. So once we notify you, you can add it automatically to your calendar in your existing email system. So now you've got that there in your normal calendaring system. So that's kind of a nice feature. Once you've entered all this data, if we go back, there's a status page that I didn't talk about initially. And the status page exists as charts. And also on the right-hand side are reminders for your leases and maintenance agreements. Yes, you're still going to get email notifications, but you'll see the reminders here as well. You'll also see an import wizard down below in the lower right that allows you to import purchasing data from other sources. And then, as I mentioned, there's charts here. There are charts based on primarily on purchasing data in this view. So hopefully that gives you a really good look at purchasing. And you can see there's definitely nothing in the SCCM world that's going to give you this capability of tracking your assets as our purchasing console does. So I want to go back to our PowerPoint and just summarize a little bit. Again, we've been doing this for over 14 years. We've been exclusively focused on IT asset management. And we really do have a strong belief. It's really one of those things that you talk about and you think everybody talks about. But once you engage in us, I think you'll find that we are definitely different as far as the support that we provide to our customers, different in a good way. Our technology is licensed by some world-class software companies, including IBM and BMC out there. I think you'll find our products easy to use. You're going to have some of the best software recognition in the industry within our product. And hopefully the demonstration today showed you our purchase tracking and reconciliation and how easy the product is actually to use. I also want to talk about an offer that we have. We call it the Freemium product. And everybody knows in order to be successful in SAM, you've got to have an accurate inventory. And our customers tell us that Express Offer Manager for SCCM adds significant value to your SAM efforts and to your SCCM implementation. And we believe we can prove this value with our ESM for SCCM Inventory Edition. And what this is our complete ESM inventory product. It's free for perpetual use for all of your machines. So you can use our inventory-only product on all your machines. And for 45 days, we'll let you also use the purchasing console, so you'll get some familiarity with that. And for 45 days, you'll get free technical support, and you'll get updates to the Express Offer Identification Database. If you like the free version, you might consider upgrading to include support and purchasing and other features of the product. And, you know, why take advantage of this? We know that a lot of you have trouble getting budget. And this is a way to get the product installed and start to realize the benefit of the product while potentially getting the budget to get your support and your purchasing as you move forward. So what we're trying to do is equip you with what you need to build your value proposition for actually using our product. So if you're interested in that, you can certainly contact our organization, our sales organization. You can go to sales@expressmetrix.com, you can go to our website, or you're welcome to call us as well. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. And what I want to do now is go take a look at see how many questions we have and try and answer these questions that have come in. There's a question, if you have multiple SCCM instances, can you collect all of them and consolidate this data? Yes, we can. We can do that. Is there a section for manual tracking for assets that are standalone, not connected to the network? And can that data be incorporated into the reports? So there is a couple of things I should point out. We do have a standalone inventory client that you could actually run on those computers and collect inventory and import those into our system. So we provide a, you can put it on a USB, go to a computer, run it, and then you can actually import it. In addition, other assets like things that we don't collect, you can actually enter into our system or you can import into our system as well, and then that data is incorporated. Question, how would you handle employees leaving and not assigned? I think what you're saying is, let's imagine you didn't assign any assets and these employees were leaving. So to me, that's primarily a process that you would put around our tool. So our tool has a variety of different ways you can do that, but again, part of that's going to be more about your process. And without getting into more details with you, I'd have to ask you a lot more questions. So if you want to have those conversations with us, we'd be glad to do that. Unused license harvesting. So if you're using our flagship product, absolutely. We have reports for unused software. If you're using the SCCM connector, we're not using any usage data out of SCCM, and that's just because that data can't be easily reconciled because of the way SCCM collects it. So I think that answers the next question as well. How do you determine the usage from SCCM? Is this, again, we do not pull any usage data from SCCM. If you want usage, you can use our flagship product and you deploy our client. And again, there's limitations to the usage collection in SCCM. First of all, there's performance issues that our SCCM people typically tell us. And second of all, again, that usage data gets associated to an executable, but there's no tying it back to a real application. Our client ties it back to a real application at the client level, so we're able to properly tell you that Excel.exe is part of the Microsoft Office 2007 Professional Suite, where SCCM can't do that. Can you import hardware software data from other sources besides SCCM? Today we only support SCCM, but it's called the Express Connector. If you have an interest in that area, I'd love to talk to you and find out what you're specifically interested in. How do you import large purchases? We do that through Excel. We've been pretty successful. If you want to import data, typically our support team will work with you. That's a no charge, meaning if you're a customer, we'll work with you, we'll help you get that in. Sometimes we can save you time in doing that import. However, we do have lots of customers that do it all by themselves as well. So it's up to you how you want to work with that. There's a question, can you input licensing keys into the inventory and make them limited access for viewing? We can import that data, and access can be limited by group, but not, and you could put an individual in a group. So potentially the purchasing administrator might be the only one that could access that. In general, though, anybody that's part of a group would be able to see that data. Does the full tool require an agent be installed on the client systems? Yes, it does. So here's what's interesting. Originally, we never had an SCCM connector, and for years and years and years, we sat alongside SCCM implementations, and they would deploy our client, and guess what? They deploy our client through SCCM. And historically, people were concerned about a client, another client. But it's a Windows application. It's no different from any other Windows application, except for it actually runs with less resources and memory than Office and all those other applications that you're running in your environment. So the client, our client's been around forever. We have our client on customers with 30 to 50,000 computers out there, and some of those have SCCM. And the reality is our client does do more than the SCCM client as far as related to asset management, and especially on the usage side. So part of that is a lot of times, though, it's a political fight of whether or not you can actually deploy another client. Can you report on data from perspective of SCCM collection? No, not currently. Currently, we do it by AD group. So there's another question. How do we tell the tool how many licenses we have for a given piece of software? Do we load it manually? No, that would be through the purchasing interface that we demonstrated. You would do it through there. So every time you enter a purchase and account for how many you've purchased, we would summarize those. Is there any limit on number of clients being managed? So we license our product by the number of clients that you're actually managing. That's how the product's actually licensed. Currently, we have our customers range anywhere from 100 seats to, I think our largest customer is 45,000 seats. So if you fall in that range, great. If you're above that range, from an SCCM perspective, we certainly can support that as well. All right. So one of the things I always like to say about questions is I'm reading these fairly quickly, and I'm trying to assess the actual question. So if I've misinterpreted a question, or if I haven't answered your question properly or to the level of detail that you want, please feel free to contact us, and we'd love to have a more in-depth conversation and ensure that we give you the quality response that you need. And again, I try to do my best to interpret these as I'm reading them, but sometimes I may be off a little bit. I'd like to thank everybody again for attending our webinar today. I know your time is valuable. And also, again, mention that there is a freemium option out there. If you're interested, feel free to contact ourselves. Thank you, and have a very good day.